Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Sanhedrin, Chav Kimmel, as we start the third chapter of Sanhedrin, which is called Parak Zeh Borer, and the Daf is dedicated for a Shmir for the Chayalim, that's all for the Shuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael and Zayis Tzara. This chapter deals with the judges and the witnesses, and we're going to start off by understanding how the litigants go to the court, whichever court they go to. How do they figure out which court to go to? So our Mishnah begins, Dine Mamanos Bishlosha, a monetary case is decided by three. Zebar lo echad, v'zebar lo echad, u'shneim bar lo od echad. Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, and this is the way Rashi understands, this is the way Rashi says we should read the Mishnah initially. Each litigant chooses a court of three. And together, the two courts choose a third court. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. So the Chachamim are no. Shnei dayanin barang lahen od echad. The Chachamim are in the position. Each litigant chooses two judges, and after that, the two judges choose a third judge, even without the knowledge of the litigants. And the Gemara is going to discuss that. Each one can disqualify the other one's judge. We'll see what that means. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. When can they disqualify? When there's a proof that they're a relative or disqualified. But if they were kosher, or if they're experts from the court, then under those circumstances, he's not able to disqualify them. Third part of the Mishnah, each one can disqualify the other one's witness. That's the position. That's only where they bring a proof that they're relative or disqualified of them. But if they're kosher, they can't disqualify them. The Gemara is going to have to explain this Mishnah. There's a lot of questions that the Mishnah raises. Says the Gemara, what does it mean? Each one has to choose a court of three, and then you get to 9. That doesn't make any sense. All you really need are 3 judges. Why do you need 9 judges? So the Gemara says, when each one selects one court, if each one selects one court, and the second one chooses another court, then neither one can force them to go to that court, but rather that both of them choose a third court to go to, where they both agree. And that's what it means. We only have 3 judges, but shneim baron od echad. So then they each one can reject the court that the other one chose, and then together they'll choose the third court. Gemara says, even the borrower can say, I'm not going to the court that you're choosing for me. But when do we say that you can reject the court if you're the lender of a lova? We said in a different context. We said within the context with respect to a court where the Maimer said a law that if one of the litigants wants to go and choose go to the central court, we forced the second litigant to go. But Rebbe Lazar said, when do we say that? That's only that the lender can force the borrower, but if it's a borrower, we force him to attend the court of that city. He can't go to another court. And so therefore, that's the case here. How can the borrower just reject its court? The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan bar Kos Shabasuria. We're talking about here the Arkos, but generally speaking, Arkos Shabasuria would refer to non-Jewish courts. But here we're referring to Jewish courts that Rashi says, Shaloyu Bekim Bedin Torah. They were not experts in the Torah. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan taught in another context, which we'll see soon. So to here, that's what we're talking about. These are Karlu Shebasuria. But if they're expert judges, according to this approach, Rabbi Lazar is saying, according to this approach, that they are, if they would be mumchen, then they would not be able, according to Gemara's first answer, if they would be actual experts, then the borrower would not be able to reject them. Papa gives a second answer. I feel tema mumchen. You could even say it's mumchen. And how is the litigant able to reject it? It could go in beidina drafuna v'rafklista. The kamra mika matarach noach. We're talking about a case where they were like the courts of Rafuna and Krista, where they were both in the same place, and so the borrower could say to the lender, I'm not disturbing you by going to a different court. It's in the same city, so it's not a disturbance. So then he has the ability to say, I don't want to go to that town. Let's go. I don't your court. Let's go to my court. Tanan, so the Gemara now is going to reject this, that each one chooses, can just reject the court that his friend chose, because we say the two judges choose a third judge. We talk about the Kadamrina and Bezdin. If you were going to say that, it's like we are suggesting that each one can just disqualify the other one's court, and then the two courts choose the third court. And the Rabbanan are saying, no, it's just a judge, and the two judges choose the third judge. If that's what you're saying, the court, after it's chosen, goes ahead and it's rejected, and then it goes ahead and selects the third court. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. What does it mean when it says this one chooses one and this one chooses one? Meaning to say, that implies that the judge needs to be that each one is choosing one entire court. But according to what we're saying, the Mishnah is saying that only in a case where one disqualifies the Bezdin do we do that. But not that ideally that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, to say the Rosh of the Mishnah that this one chooses one court, this one chooses court, means to say that that's the right way to do it. But that's not. That's only in a extenuating circumstances that we do that. No, when each one chooses one judge, this is what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is saying who chooses the three judges. When one litigant chooses one judge and the other litigant chooses the other judge, then the two judges choose the third judge. So if that's the case, the Gemara says, why do they have to choose the judges in this case? Why do they have to choose the judges in this case? So Amri b'ma'arava, so they said in Eretz Yisrael, Mishmei de Rabbi Zera, mitoch shezeh barlo dayin echad v'zeh barlo dayin echad, u'shneim barlo od echad, yotza din lamito, because each one chooses one judge, and the two judges then choose a third judge. Then we're going to have yotza din lamito. Then the court, then the law will go out in the proper way. What's the reason? Because then the litigants will be more likely to uphold the ruling, because even somebody who's found guilty will say, listen, I chose my judge, and if he was able to find a merit for me, he would have found it. And the judges also will look at it from both sides, because both of the litigants have chosen them. That's how Rashi explains it. And also Tosafos. And Tosafos says that really it means that there won't be more judges weighted to find guilt than to find innocent. I mean, to say because we're going to have making sure that everyone is getting a fair hearing. Now the Gemara says the Chachamim say that the two judges choose a third judge. So Gemara says, Nema, do you want to say that Rameir Chachamim are arguing who chooses the third judge, if it's the Baalei Din or the Dayanim? According to Rameir, it's the litigant, but according to the Chachamim, it's the judge. So the Gemara says, but maybe the Rav Yehuda Marav Kamiflagei. Maybe they're arguing about it. That was statement of Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Dam Rabbi Yehuda Marav. And Chosman Eidim Al Ashtar. Elam Ken Yodim Yichosim Mine. Maybe the reason why the Rabbanan said the judges have to choose the third judge is because they agree with the statement that Rabbi Yehuda Marav said that the witnesses don't sign a contract, aren't allowed to sign unless they know who's signing with them. Because maybe the person who's signing with them is disqualified, and they'll be embarrassed that they're signed with the person who's disqualified. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir Leitzlei, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Rabbanan Islay Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. So the Rabbi Meir who says that the two litigants choose it, he doesn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. You can be a judge with whoever you're sitting with, doesn't matter. Whereas the Rabbanan who say the judges choose, they must agree with this statement. The Gemara says, no. The Kuliyama is with Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Everybody agrees with the statement that Rabbi Yehuda Amarav says. And everybody says the judges need to agree. Is the question: do we also need the litigants to agree? Rabbi Meir says that we also need the litigants to agree on the judges. He says no, we just need the judges to agree on the third judge, but not the litigant. The witnesses don't sign the contract unless they know who's signing with them. This is what the Nikiya Adas in Jerusalem would do toward the Nikiya Adas. These are the greatest people of the generation, and they were very careful about their honor. So what would they do? They wouldn't sign a contract unless they know who's signing with them, because they don't want to be embarrassed when the other witness was found to be disqualified. And they wouldn't sit down to a judgment unless they know who's sitting with them. They wouldn't go into a meal. And they wouldn't go down to a meal unless they know who's sitting at the meal with them, because they didn't want to sit at a meal with somebody who was an Amma Aretz. So the Rashi's the Summer Medaik from Rashi, Shingnai, who the Talmidei Chachamim would say Eitzel Amarat Pesuda. It's disrespectful for the Torah scholar to sit next to, but if he's at the same meal, he's just not next to him, then it's not going to be an issue. It said in our Mishnah, this one could disqualify this judge, and this one could qualify this judge. So the Gemara says that's the position of Rabbi Meir. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. Say no, that's only when you know that he's disqualified. The Gemara says, "Kol kamina de pasal dayani." Is Rabbi Meir really say you could just willy-nilly disqualify a judge? I'm Rabbi Yochanan Markosha B'Surya Shanam. No, then this is where Rabbi Yochanan said the statement. That's where the judges were not experts. The Arkos of Surya. The Gemara says, you mean to say, but by experts? No, Hamidiktani Seifa, but in the conclusion clause it says, that's where they are approved that they're relatives, then you can disqualify them. But if they're experts or kosher, you can't disqualify them. So Rameir is saying even if they're experts, you can disqualify them. So the Gemara says, no, you can't prove that from the position of the Chachamim. This is what they mean to say. But if they're kosher, then we will view them as though they were experts from the court. So you can't disqualify them. So the Gemara says, Tashma Amru Rabbi Meir Lo Kol Imenu Posel Dayin Shemum Kol Rabim. So the Chacham said to Rabbi Meir that Rabbi Meir says you could disqualify expert judges. The proof is the Chacham said to Rabbi Meir, you don't have the ability to just go ahead and disqualify a judge as an expert. So this is the proof that Rabbi Meir is saying that you can even disqualify an expert. Gemara says no. It means you can't disqualify an expert you can't disqualify a judge that the people have appointed, even though he's not an expert. And Tanya Nami Hachi, proof that Rameir says you can't disqualify an expert judge. Rameir says you could always disqualify until he accepts upon himself a judge who is an expert for the community. Gemara says, but witnesses who are not relatives, are viewed as though they are expert judges, meaning witnesses don't need to be experts. So if you trust them, then they're believed. This one can disqualify his witnesses. This one can qualify his witnesses. But the Gemara says, no, what does that statement mean? It's impossible that Rameir say you could just disqualify the other person's witnesses. Tani Ado, you could disqualify his one witness, meaning say when the litigant brought one witness, he can disqualify him. But if he brought two witnesses, he can't. Ado Amai, well, if that's the case, why did he bring one witness? If it's for money, the Torah disqualified him. If it's for an oath, we believe one witness, like two. So why would he bring one witness? No, it's where it's for money, and the litigant says, I have one witness, and the other one says, okay, bring him, I'll believe him. And now he brings him, and the mayor says he can go back and disqualify him. Micah Mashma, and the other bay that he can, even though he said he'd believe him, he can now say, I'm not. So Nina, didn't we already learn that? We're going to get to that tomorrow's daf. Amar lo, neman alai abba, neman alai avicha, neman alai shlosh aroi bakar. Mayor Omer Yahol Absabo. If he said, I believe your father, I believe your father would be the judge, or I believe my father, or the three shepherds, or Mayor says he can go back. I mean, say he can't go back. So we already learned the statement where Mayor says you can go back. And he says that's where you accepted him as one judge, and that'll have two other judges. Or Mayor says that since he accepted upon himself somebody who's disqualified, biblically speaking, he can go back and change it. If that's the case, why does he have to teach us again? Then he could go back. So the Gemara says, we need both cases. If we just had the second Mishnah, case of your father or my father, but how come Rabbanan? There the rabbis say I can't go back because your father and my father, they're generally speaking good judges. But it's just in this case that they're not qualified. So therefore you can't go back. But if you want to accept one witness as two, that's never good. Maybe the Chacham would agree with Rameir that you could go back. And if we only in the case of one witness where you accepted as two, maybe Baha Kamar Rameir, their Rameir says you go back. But in the case of the judges, maybe agrees with the Rabbanan, you can't go back. So therefore it's Shricha. And the Gemara says, but it can't be we're talking about a case of one witness. I mean, Diktani Reisha, this one disqualifies his judge, Dayano, the Seifa, Eidav, and then the Kuri clause, it's in the plural, Amadavka Katani, meaning specifically talking about he disqualifies his two witnesses. So Amar Lazar, Babahu Achar Laposlan. Now we're talking about a case when how can he disqualify the two witnesses where the litigant comes with another witness to disqualify this one witness? So the Gemara says, how can he ever do that? He's partial. He's touching the testimony. He's biased. So Ravi could go in Shakaro of error. So he says no. He has a personal. He's not talking about the testimony, but he's saying this person is a disqualified witness. You want to say he's claiming he's a robber? No, he's still biased. No, I'm canceling out his whole family from being witnesses. And then willy-nilly, this one's going to go back. And Rameir Savar, I'm testifying about the family. And this one witness is Memela falling away. Rabbanan Savar, Rabbanan say, no, you're disqualified because you're Nogea, you're touching the testimony. Kiyasa, the Gemara is going to Gemara brings in the name of Rabbi Yochanan another explanation of the dispute, whether or not about this one witness. If you disqualify the one, if the litigant can testify against the one witness. The Gemara says, the dispute between Rameir and the Chachamim, whether or not one of the litigants can disqualify the witnesses of the second one, that's only b'shtei kiteidim. Also, if there's two groups of witnesses. The Rameir Amar Tzarech Habar, Rabbanan Savri Ein Tzarech Habar. The Rameir says that if this person claimed, I have two sets of witnesses, he has to bring both sets of witnesses. And so therefore, even though he typically speaking only has one set, he only needs one set. But since he said I have two, he now has to bring two. And so therefore, the litigant is not so since he has to bring two, Therefore, if he's going to disqualify one set, he's not going to be nogel edus because the other person has to bring the other set anyway. He doesn't have to bring two witnesses because and so therefore the litigant cannot pass all the witnesses because he's nogel edus because with his testimony the litigant won't force him to pay. So therefore, without this testimony, now with one said, everybody says you can't testify, meaning to say. So therefore, a mayor is saying, since he's going to have to bring two sets of witnesses, you don't need both sets to be kosher. So therefore, he can disqualify one. When the Rabbanan says, since he doesn't need to bring both sets, therefore he can disqualify even one. Let's say he only has. Let's say after he disqualified the first group, the second group would be disqualified. So Rav Amr Masi said, "Ein shema kas achas mao, ein shema kas achas va'amris, aval b'kas achas derechol ein yochol fotzon." If there's only one group of witnesses, what will be the case? We just said if there's only one group, so you can't disqualify them. Ellen nimtzis kas shnia krovin o psulin. So if the second group is now disqualified, do we go back and relook at the first group, which the litigant disqualified? So Amar Lahan Kvar Idu Arishonim. Then no, he's already testified. And so therefore, you can't retroactively make them kosher by disqualifying the litigant. Vikadami Ravashi, that it was not said by Rav Ami and Ravasi to meaning Ravashi said it's very Idu Harishonim, the theory testified. So the Gemara says, well, maybe this is actually the dispute that we had at the end of Baba Basra in the last week in Baba Basra in that Kuf Samach Test that name of Bepukta to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Kameflagi. Because we had this dispute at the end of Baba Basra between Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Tanya Aboli Dom B'Shtar Chazaka. A person says, I have a proof, and the proof is I contracted this in my property, and I've also been living on this land for 3 years. So Nido Mishtar to Rebbe. Rebbe says, then we look at the contract. And not the chazaka. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says Nido B'Chazaka. So then we look at the chazaka. Ma'avinam B'Chazaka V'lo B'Shtar. Meaning to say we don't look at the contract according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you need to now bring both proof that you have a contract and a chazaka. And we say that they're arguing about whether or not once a person says he has a claim, even though he says too much, whether he needs to prove both. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that you don't need to prove it, so therefore you could use either the chazaka or the shtar, whereas the rabbis are the position that you need the chazaka and the shtar, and that's the dispute. So maybe that's what's going on here as well. So maybe also over here, Rameir and the Chachamim is this dispute. Rameir says that you need to prove everything, and so therefore he's going to have to bring two sets of witnesses, and so therefore the litigant can disqualify the first set, but the Rabbanan say ain't tzarchavar. So therefore, the litigant cannot even disqualify the first set. The says no. I'll leave it to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Kol Yamu Puigi. According to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who's of the position that you don't need to be mevarer. Both Rameir and the Chachamim are not arguing that they say that he doesn't need a mevarer, and they're not arguing about his position. They're arguing according to the position of Rebbe, who says that you need to bring the contract in addition to chazaka. The Rameir says that you could disqualify the witness. He holds like Rebbe. The only where you say you have a chazaka and a shtar, that's where the Rabbanan say, that's where Rebbe says you need to bring both, because the whole proof that he has the chazaka is coming from the shtar, meaning to say that if he holds the land for 3 years and he says, I just took it without, and nobody sold it to me, that's not a chazaka. He has to say he bought it and he lost the contract. And so since the chazaka is coming from the strength of the shtar, Therefore, if he says that he has the contract, he has to bring it. These witnesses are totally disconnected from the other witnesses. I feel Rabbi Moda, according to the Rabbanan, the Ein Tzarech you don't have to bring two sets of witnesses, and that's the Chacham's position. And that therefore, you can't even disqualify the first set. Okay, we'll stop here. This is today's beautiful daf. Yasher koach.